Anybody who's been interested in the gut microbiome and how it affects systemic health, you're going to want to listen to this episode because today I'm going to be talking with a functional wellness practitioner and dietitian who's a women's health expert, Lisa Smith. She and I are going to be talking about the gut health and hormone balance connection. You can optimize your microbiome, and that can be the key to alleviating symptoms like mood swings, fatigue, and stubborn weight gain. It'll help you achieve lasting health because the gut microbiome hormone connection affects every aspect of your health. So, we're going to have a great conversation today. Tune in, enjoy, get something that you like to drink, relax, maybe a pen and paper because you're going to want to take notes on this one. Lisa, hi, thanks for being on the Delivering Health podcast.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Thank you for having me. I'm honored to be here.
So, why don't you share a little bit about your background, how you got involved in this, and why this is something that's so important to you?
Yeah, I'd love to. So, John, I am originally from Pennsylvania. I had a private practice of a clinic, a functional wellness clinic with a nice team in Pennsylvania. And about a year and a half ago, I moved to Charleston, South Carolina. So I sold my practice. I'm working online virtually with clients now. But back when I had Integrative Wellness Center, which was my brick and mortar clinic, I decided that I could only share information one-on-one. I was also teaching group programs, but my impact was so limited and there's so much great information. As you know, when we get into this space, we want everybody to know what we know because we know it's life-changing. So I decided to start a podcast, and you've been a guest on my podcast, which I love.
Yeah,
It's called the Pretty Well Podcast.
it's a great podcast. Everybody should definitely
Thank
check that
you.
out as well.
Thank you. I love it. And I'm in year 4 now, and it's been a great ride. And I've had amazing guests like you on. But as in this space, we end up learning more and more. We learn from new people who we meet. We tend to love research, so we keep learning.
Mm.
And when I moved, I went from being a generalist. So I saw everything. I saw gut problems, autoimmune problems, Lyme disease, mold toxicity, hormonal imbalances, you name it. And when I moved a year and a half ago, I decided that I wanted to narrow my focus and really develop a niche because I found that more and more my clients tended to be women who started to experience some hormonal changes. Of course, we can be any age for that, but I started to see people in their mid to late 30s, up into their mid to late 60s, and they're saying, I got something going on. And no matter who I see, it's just, I might make some progress, but I'm not really fixing the problem. So that's when I decided to narrow my focus. And that's why today I'm so excited about what we're going to talk about because this is where things often get missed. We often think about how hormones affect the gut, but you and I are going to have a deep dive into what the gut does to our hormones. And it really can be the answer to some very frustrating, long-standing symptoms that people are like, I am banging my head against the wall. Why am I not getting anywhere?
So, more and more research is coming out, and it's just indisputable now the connection with gut health and overall systemic health. There's obviously GI specific symptoms like gas and bloating that can occur. And there are other neurological symptoms like brain fog that can occur. There's the gut bone connection now with chronic inflammation in the intestines causing osteoporosis. But all of these seem to be really discrete challenges people are happening. And I've got to imagine that there's some, mechanism underlying a lot of these besides just inflammation. And I'm curious to know if hormones sort of cut across all of these different issues in some way and how the gut is affecting that.
Absolutely. The fascinating thing is the more we learn, the more we realize we have yet to learn. But when we're looking at the role of inflammation and hormones, it becomes more of a matrix, is what I've found. There's nothing linear in healing, and we are like that proverbial onion that we peel a layer and there's another layer. But what we're finding, yes, absolutely. The gut impacts bone health. That is your wheelhouse, right? The gut impacts cognition. Mood disorders, that's a big one. They're finding that as we heal the gut, anxiety reduces and mood balances and stabilizes. But when it comes to hormones, this is so interesting. So gut dysbiosis, and for our listeners, dysbiosis is a fancy term just meaning your gut is imbalanced. We look at the gut as an ecosystem. We've got the good guys, we've got the bad guys. It's kind of like if you had a little terrarium at home, you got all these little things living in there, and some are, when they're in balance, everything is beautiful. You're not growing algae in your ecosystem, everything's surviving. But when the ecosystem gets out of balance, we start to see the effects of that. And that's what dysbiosis is. So I like to really simplify it and say we got a good army, we got a bad army. The bad army does not need to be eradicated. It just needs to be kept under the good army. We need the good army calling the shots and keeping the bad army in its place. And what we're finding with dysbiosis is through a bunch of reasons in our environment, our stress, there's so many things that impact our our gut microbiome, is that we find that the bad guys tend to grow and the good guys tend to get knocked down by the bad guys. Now we've got dysbiosis. Now we start seeing those effects that you mentioned, cognition, bone health, all the other things, but also on our hormones.
And so in the hormone connection piece, when you're looking at that, there are lots of hormones. I mean, serotonin, dopamine. I mean, vitamin D is even considered a hormone now. GABA, lots of different hormones. Which one of those or ones of those are they all impacted by the gut?
Yeah, so hormones, you're right. There are so many
I
hormones.
mean, there's
And
sex hormones too, right? Testosterone, estrogen, progesterone. It's a long list.
exactly. And they're a symphony. So imagine if you go to the symphony and one player is really out of tune, then everything is off because they're all dependent. It's interdependent. So when one is off, everything gets thrown off and there's this dissonance or this it's just not working the way it's supposed to. So I want to give you an example of one of the things that happens when we have dysbiosis. There are so many things. You mentioned serotonin, you mentioned all the neurotransmitters. They're all impacted, some directly, some indirectly. So let's talk about one that's impacted directly. And for women and men, but much more for women, is our estrogen. So a part of this beautiful microbiome, this terrain we have, is called the estrobolome. And the estrobolome is that part of that gut, the gut balance, that regulates our estrogen levels. So, estrogen, when it's ready, when the body uses it and it's ready to be eliminated, it goes through the gut, and that's how we eliminate it.
Mm-hmm.
And so think about it gets packaged like on a garbage truck and it's heading out of the body into the toilet through the garbage truck. Now, if we have gut dysbiosis, then the body begins, the bad army begins to produce too much of an enzyme called beta glucuronidase. And beta glucuronidase actually attaches something, a glucuronic acid molecule. So just attaches something to that estrogen, knocks it off the garbage truck. So now rather than going out in the garbage, it recycles through the body. And then it continues and then it's not just it's all this estrogen keeps recycling. Now we see symptoms of estrogen dominance. That could be things like heavy periods, migraines, bloating, joint pain, inflammation. It potentially could also be a contributor to hormone-based cancers like breast cancer, endometrial cancer, those kinds of things. So that is something that's just not well known, this estrobolome. So people who get on HRT or they get on medication to help balance their estrogen, it could be to increase it or decrease it. If they don't address gut dysbiosis, they'll never fully get the results they're looking for. That could be why they're trying to do hormonal. We can't just target it from the organ or the gland. We also have to look at the gut's role.
And so when you're looking at the estrobolome, are there specific genera of bacteria then that are is it that specific, or is it just looking at the overall balance, or both?
Yes and yes,
Okay.
both. So specifically, we can be looking at some gram-negative bacteria. But in general, it doesn't have to be that complicated. We just look at, is the gut working well or is it not working well? And there's some amazing tests for that. I personally love the GI map for that because it tells us a whole lot about what's going on and it tells us actual beta glucuronidase levels. That's a stool test. But in general, if we know we don't always know we have gut dysbiosis. So if we're having these nagging symptoms and we can't get our finger on it or on the pulse of it, then it really makes sense to work with somebody who's very good at functional wellness. But if we know our gut's off, a lot of us do know that, then it's starting to take steps to bring balance back.
And what about other hormones like cortisol or mentioned serotonin, dopamine? Are those also reflected in the balance of the bacteria in the gut or the
They, cer-
organisms in the gut?
they certainly are, yes. So we make something like 80% of our serotonin in our gut. So if our gut is off, that's a lot of times why we see when people improve gut healing, we see mood stability increase because our serotonin now is working,
But
it's being produced properly, right?
my understanding is those are produced by the enterochromaffin cells, cells in the lining of the intestines, not by the bacteria themselves. So maybe the bacteria do produce those. I don't know. I mean, educate me, but is there
You
an
know,
interaction there?
there's an interaction there. So right, so that's a great point. But when you have dysbiosis, it's in fact it's impacting those cells as well. Everything's impacted because when you have dysbiosis, now you likely have leaky gut syndrome. And so leaky gut syndrome is going to be affecting those cells because what it does, I like to think of leaky gut like this. People, or it's also called it's called intestinal hyperpermeability as well.
Yeah.
And what happens is if we think about our digestive system, just from our mouth to our butt, as one tube, like think of it as one hose, not forget about all the organs. And if you went to Lowe's or Home Depot today and you're like, I'm going to get a new garden hose. I want to spruce up the yard and I'm going to get a hose. You get it, you screw it onto the spigot. Tomorrow you're going to water everything. You're so excited about this new hose. And then what you didn't know is that overnight your neighbor kid came and he poked holes all through your new hose. So then you go
Dang
to
neighbor.
yeah,
Dang
bratty
neighbor.
neighbor kid. He always is up to something. So you go to water your garden, your lawn, and you get some water out of the end of the hose, but it's now springing leaks all over the place. That's a great picture of what happens with leaky gut. With leaky gut, it's meant to be pretty solid. It's semi-permeable if we want to get technical. It's, things cross back and forth when they're supposed to.
Yeah.
But with leaky gut, it's way before they're supposed to because there are these little fissures, these little holes. And so the contents of our digestive tract are now getting into our bloodstream and they're causing all kinds of problems, inflammation, endotoxemia. We can talk about all that, but that does affect those cells then that produce the serotonin. So it goes hand in hand. Dysbiosis and leaky gut go hand in hand, and they both have dramatic effects on our hormones, as well as so many other things.
And so when you're looking at this symphony, as you called it, are you also testing the hormones, or are you just getting this data from understanding of the bacteria or the organisms in the intestines? It's more than just bacteria. We haven't even talked about yeast yet, and I'm curious to know about that, or parasites. I'm curious to know about that, how that if those fit in. But are you also testing hormones?
So you can. I like to do when in my perfect world, if someone comes to me, I like to do the GI map, which I mentioned, which tells
Mhm.
us so very much. Then I like to do an organic acids test called an oat test, and I like to run a Dutch test, which is a hormone test. Now, you can get a whole lot with any one of those tests. So you don't have to do all three, but all three gives you this beautiful picture of the puzzle. It starts putting more and more pieces in.
Yeah, those are great. Those are great tests. And
Mhm.
so one of the things that with the organic acids test, it gives a tremendous amount of information. I don't know which panel you're running, but just so listeners understand, that can tell whether or not there are certain organisms that are producing, metabolites that can, show that there's a potential infection, like perhaps a yeast overgrowth, or bacteria secrete specific organic acids that then get into the bloodstream, get filtered out into the urine, out of the by the kidneys and pass out in the urine. And then are you doing the nutritional analytes as well? So we can look at organic acids testing and put together very specific, customized recommendations that are tailored to somebody's unique biochemical needs. Like, are they functionally deficient in B12? Are they functionally deficient in other B vitamins? So I'm just curious to know how you're using that test.
I have run SpectraCell micronutrient tests, but tell me what you like to run.
So typically organic acids testing that I've ordered in the past has looked at those metabolites from organisms, from
Hmm.
bacterial overgrowth, but also looked at different analytes that indicate specific B vitamins, B complex vitamins, like alpha ketoglutarate, methylmalonate, formiminoglutamate, things like that.
Hmm.
More nutritional status type of evaluation than directly with the gut. So I'm unsure, because you do test hormones sometimes, or with this you can look at that with the Dutch test. I just don't know if the organic acids test is also providing some other nutritional information that can be important for this overall picture that you evaluate.
It definitely does show that. I agree with you. I wasn't sure if you were also referring to, in addition, looking at a more comprehensive micronutrient test that then looks at
Uh,
many, many
Oh,
micronutrients.
again, there, as you know,
Yeah.
there's a long list of that can turn out to be very expensive testing. I don't think all necessary, but yeah, micronutrient testing for
Yeah.
minerals. I mean, for individual vitamins beyond what's on organic acid tests. I mean, there's just almost an infinite number of tests people can run, and yeah, I don't think you don't need them all. I don't believe people don't need
I
all.
agree. I agree. And I like those three key tests because they give us so much information to go on that when we put that together, we really start to see the needle move. We really start to address it. Now, you brought something up, cortisol, and cortisol is really interesting. The effects, so when you're asking about the effects of cortisol, anything that causes stress on our body. It could be emotional stress, it could be mental stress, relational stress, physical stress, it could be food sensitivities, anything. It could be leaky gut that we talked about. Anything that causes stress will raise our cortisol levels. And now, if our cortisol levels are chronically elevated, which honestly, there aren't many people who I could say aren't chronically elevated to some degree, that contributes to leaky gut. And once we have leaky gut, this is a whole, well, I can take you down a rabbit trail, but the problem is it starts this whole cycle and it becomes a vicious cycle. So elevated cortisol leads to more problems that elevate more cortisol, right? So that definitely has an impact as well. And then get this, get this is so fascinating. Pregnenolone is one of the raw materials for cortisol, but it's also a key raw material for our sex hormones. So people who start to see hormonal imbalances younger, so when we're talking women in their 30s and they're starting to have perimenopausal symptoms, much before what we would anticipate they would, there's something called a pregnenolone steal. And so when we have this chronically elevated cortisol, well, that has to be made from something that doesn't just come out of thin air. So it's eating up all this pregnenolone called a pregnenolone steal, which is robbing it from the raw materials to make our sex hormones. So
Yeah.
that's a pretty interesting role also of, the gut and the stress on our hormones.
When I think about the cortisol and first of all, I think it's interesting the fact that cortisol has it will damage cells and decrease the ability of cells to repair themselves. But then with the stress response, there's also epinephrine and norepinephrine, which decreases blood flow to the intestines, which
Mm.
further can damage the lining of the intestines, contribute to that hyperpermeable gut or leaky gut. And I think that it gets to the point of, this isn't all just biological, mechanistic in terms of there are bacteria. We haven't gotten to how you then treat or deal with the dysbiosis, but essentially correcting that, whether it's through antibiotics or herbs or whatever modalities that you use. But what about the psychological component? Because people under chronic stress, yes, there's physical stress. I mean, being in chronic pain can is a stress, but then there's emotional stress. So what about the emotional component? That if somebody's depressed and they have dysbiosis, what came first? I mean, was the chicken or the egg?
Oh my gosh, that's a loaded question you gave me, John.
I like tough questions, and
That's
maybe there's not an answer for it. I don't know, but I just love thinking about these things.
okay, so you are just digging right into where I've been this past year. So I've had this beautiful clinic. It was amazing. We helped so many people get better, really, truly. After they'd seen many practitioners, they'd come in desperate and so rewarding. But in this past year, as I've been changing because I sold that to someone else and now I'm doing something kind of different. I've done a deep dive into that piece of it, into deep stress and trauma.
Mm,
And what I've come to, we all have that. We all have some degree of deep stress and trauma, however we define it. It doesn't matter. It's very bio-individual. But there's so many great books about it now. The Body Keeps the Score, and then Gabor Mate's When the Body Says No, and all these and fascia experts and all this information that's coming up and saying, even if we've dealt with it well with a counselor or a therapist, even if we've done that, it doesn't necessarily mean the body, the tissues have released those sources that deep stress.
mm,
So that can continue to play a role and exactly what you've talked about. It can be underlying emotional stress, which is continually impacting our gut health, our leaky gut, inflammatory levels, and all of that. So it's this amazing, it's beautiful, but we do need to piece by piece look at it. There's a lot testing can do, but we also need some introspection into our identity. Who am I? What is my life right now? What do I want my life to look like? What needs to change for it to go from A to Z? Those are all things we could have an entire episode about.
yeah, I mean, chronic stress is such a killer on every body system. I mean, it's again, like I said earlier, with the gut bone connection, it's just irrefutable now, and that is too. I mean, what chronic stress is doing to our health, to our bodies, to our microbiome, it can't be ignored as part of the overall puzzle. So you do this testing, you look at the symptoms, the symptom intake. Um, all right, so you got all this data. What do you do?
Yeah. Well, even let's for our listeners. I know you're the same. I always like to give things that what could you do today? I mean, the testing, then you work with this practitioner who knows the testing and can really dial in the nuances and
Mm-hmm.
really help you. I also like to make sure that we're addressing food sensitivities. Once we have leaky gut, we do have food sensitivities.
I've seen
Whether
that
we
a lot.
recognize that or not, it's a fact,
Did you
right? So
test for that as well?
I have a
Is it
great test for
IgG
that.
testing?
It's not. I
Oh,
used to
really?
do IgG
Oh,
testing.
interesting.
I found one I like so much better. I found it years ago. It's called the MRT, mediator release test, and it
I didn't know that.
it is a form of the immune system, but it's not the IgG antibodies. And I have found it to be so much more effective. So IgG is not bad. It's just not complete. And I wouldn't say MRT is perfect. I don't think there's a perfect test, but
Right.
it has
Hmm.
been very, very effective
But the
in
bottom line is you see the results clinically.
I do.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. So I love that as well. But again, so if you work with someone, then they're going to dial in these nuances, right? And they're going to do a very specific protocol. But if someone at home, one of our listeners is saying, I just want to start something tomorrow. I want to go to the grocery store. What can I do from a food standpoint, a supplement standpoint? Then what you can do, if we have obvious food sensitivities, we kind
Yep.
of know, right? We kind of know, oh, every time I eat tomatoes, I am achy in my joints that night or the next day, or every time, and it can be healthy food. It can be chicken, rice, vegetables. It just if you notice that there's anything you eat that just doesn't agree with you consistently, Give it up for a month and see what happens, and then try it again and see what happens. And if you feel inflammation or any kind of, it could be rashes. Some people with dairy, they get rashes, especially around their hairline and behind and their neck. That's a classic dairy sensitivity, but not everybody gets it. So it's bio individual. Gluten can be anything from joint pain to eczema to gut health to, itching to you name it. And then there are others as well. But anyway, give it up. And that will be one step to reducing inflammation. Then there's some very low-hanging fruit. Reduce ultra processed foods. Those are those
Yeah.
things that come in bags and boxes and right, they're not real food. They're just something we eat, but they're not food. Food is something that grew, flew, walked, or swam. That's food, right? It either grew in the ground, it flew in the air, it walked on the ground, or it swam. That's real food. So start to replace ultra processed food with real food. And as you're doing that, reduce your simple carbohydrate intake, right? And that is amazing because your gut microbiome starts to adapt based on your diet and what you give it within 3 days. So whatever you feed will grow. If you're feeding ultra processed foods, you're feeding the bad guys. If you're feeding your gut real food, you're feeding the good guys.
I love this approach because it's empowering. I mean, people can start today doing something to help improve their health and their gut microbiome. What about sleep? We know that that also affects the gut microbiome.
Sleep affects it dramatically. Not getting enough sleep raises those cortisol levels that we just talked about. Cortisol is not bad. It has a place in our life. We need it. It helps us survive. But nothing spells fun like something overdone, and that's cortisol. Like that, it's overdone. And when we don't sleep well, it raises that cortisol, which leads to all those problems we talked about. But can I just jump back to food for a minute? Because I want to
Oh,
highlight some
yeah.
specific
One of
foods
my
that
favorite topics. Any
oh,
come back to
great.
food anytime you want.
Perfect. Well, this will make a difference. First of all, we have the good guys and the bad guys. So we want to, whatever you feed will grow. So we want to feed the good guys. What they love the most are vegetables because vegetables are full of fiber and phytonutrients, which just means when you're told to eat the color of the rainbow, the colors are the phytonutrients, but they all have these different properties that increase our vitality. They reduce inflammation. They help us look younger, help us feel younger. So feed your gut vegetables. And specifically, there are a handful of them that are rich in prebiotic fibers.
Yeah.
All that means is food for your good army. That's all it means. Prebiotic is food for your good army. So you want to, and they're delicious foods. They're things like some fruits, apples and bananas, artichokes, avocado, leeks, garlic, onions. Those are all rich prebiotics that feed our good guys. So the more we focus on those, the better.
Well, and the dietary fiber is processed by these bacteria to help create short chain fatty acids,
Yes.
butyrate, propionate, acetate, which are anti-inflammatory, which help heal the lining of the gut. So it's not just helping to readjust and rebalance that gut microbiome, but it's actively helping to heal the intestinal lining.
Right. So now we're giving our listeners things that you can go do right now that are going to reduce inflammation, start to heal your gut, start to feed your good army. And these are life-changing. They don't seem life-changing. The key, though, is consistency.
I love
We
that.
get all excited. We'll go out and do it for 2 weeks,
Yeah.
but it's
And
consistency.
this is really about how to eat for life, to promote your health for the rest of your life. The standard American diet is horrible. Right
Mhm.
now in the US, about 60% of calories are from ultra processed foods, which is driving this epidemic of chronic diseases. So it can be a big shift for somebody to start introducing more fruits and vegetables. Most people don't even get the minimum recommended amount of whole foods every day. So I love your approach. I love your recommendations. And I'm curious to know what suggestions you have to help people transition into this in a way that helps them create new habits for a lifetime.
Yes, yes, you're singing my song. So that is exactly what this is. We don't even think diet and also just let go of any shame. Like, don't be like, oh, I ate bad today. I have taught weight loss courses for years, and I would have people come in and say, oh, I ate really bad this week, so I just gave up. Well, first of all, don't worry about that. Don't put good or bad on it. Just focus. It's that's to me is like saying, "Oh, I dropped my cell phone. Now I'm going to stamp on it." Like stomp on it. No,
I
just pick
love
up your
that.
cell phone. It's okay. It's
Yeah.
there's no judgment. Don't worry about it. Just like make the next right decision. So what? If you ate stuff that was the old way of eating, super full of ultra processed foods, okay, add something you like that's a whole food. And so my advice is, in addition to release all shame, seriously, self-talk, like monitor self-talk. If you wouldn't say it to your grandmother or a child, don't say it to yourself. Just put
I
that
love
rule on
that.
there. And then second of all, when you go to the grocery store, don't worry about like I'm dieting or I have to get all these things out of my diet. What can you add? The more good stuff you add, the less room there is for the ultra processed stuff. So the more of that rich vegetables more so than fruit because we also want to make sure we balance blood sugar. We don't have to get into all that. Fruit is good, but keep it to one serving a day because you don't want to once we throw blood sugar off it impacts that symphony even more and that could be again another episode, but just add good, so find some veggies you love and start adding those on every day. Eat more than you think you should. That's, if you're like, oh, I had veggies last night, okay, we'll snack on them today at lunchtime and get some at dinner and even try to get some in the morning maybe.
I love that. And in terms of vegetables that might not be good for people, you mentioned tomatoes. That people might react to tomatoes. I mean, people can have allergies to anything. I
Mhm.
do want to point out that family is called the Solanaceae family. It also includes eggplants and potatoes. So just understand if somebody listening to this realizes that they may be reacting to tomatoes, they may want to just in their diet test other Solanaceae type plants, and you can just Google what all those are. But typical potatoes and eggplant. Is eggplant a Solanaceae? I can't remember.
It
Yeah,
is. You've
yeah,
you've you've
eggplant
pretty
too.
much summed it up. And in addition to that, peppers, sweet
Oh,
peppers,
peppers, right.
peppers. Yep, and
Bell
they're also
peppers also.
bell
Yeah.
peppers, sadly. Yeah, yeah.
Oh,
They're also called, yeah, they're also called nightshades. Now,
oh, right, right.
yeah, some people may eat them with no problems, but we find that people who tend toward joint inflammation and arthritis may tend to have more sensitivities to them. So if that's something, if you're prone to a lot of joint pain, achiness, arthritis, try giving up nightshades for again a month. It's very hard to do in the summer. It's tomatoes, sweet bell peppers, as you said, eggplant, potatoes. And this is really interesting. I can eat a small amount of potatoes, but I can't eat peppers at all. Isn't that interesting?
You get the
So
joint inflammation. Is that
I
your
do. Oh,
so
I
so
really
with the MRT, if somebody says, well, God, that's a lot to try and cut out and experiment with, I'd rather just do testing. Does the MRT testing that you do test for all of those?
it sure does. And it does, and it tests for the compounds as well as all the vegetables. So it would test for the solanase as well. So it looks at that. Even things like nitrates, sulfates, like so it tests for chemicals, fruits, vegetables, protein,
Yeah.
grains,
Because
legumes.
it can be really challenging to tease that out. And the amount of discipline and rigor that somebody has to have to really cut all those foods out for a month is hard because there can be contaminants if you eat at a restaurant. There might be some of it in it that you don't know. And the immune system, I found that when somebody has eliminated a food that their immune system is reacting to, that the immune system's primed. It is like an army that is, ready to attack. It so knows that there's danger somewhere, and so when that inflammation, the immune system starts to kind of calm down, that memory is still there. So if you do eat, I've had patients then who do actually eat something that they're allergic to, not without realizing it, and they have a huge flare up.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've found over many years that oftentimes it's just more efficient and it's easier to do the testing. Not You don't have to. You can definitely do an elimination diet, but the testing I found clinically, I've liked suggesting to patients because it gives the roadmap. It gives the data we need to make very specific decisions.
And to your point, when you do an elimination diet, it's wearisome because you're not sure what you're you're not sure. You're thinking you should eliminate things. How would someone know to eliminate tomatoes if someone didn't say, "Hey, maybe you should eliminate tomato"?
Yeah.
Like you would be thinking you were doing something good. So I find that when people do an elimination diet, they may be consistent for a month, or they may say, "Oh, it didn't help me," but they didn't realize they were getting cross-contamination. They didn't realize that if you're sensitive to tomato, you might also be sensitive to pepper.
Yeah.
So what I do love about the testing is it gives people black and white data, and when you have that, you can be so much more consistent.
Well, and the gold standard, as I was taught it many years ago for an elimination diet, is to go start on a hypoallergenic diet for, I can't remember how long, a week, 2 weeks of you basically rice and chicken,
Ugh,
and
yeah,
and then add one food at a time, like every 3 days. You just one isolated food. I mean, it's just not possible for most people.
brutal.
I could
No,
never do that. I'd rather just do the testing. So you have a new business model now. You left your clinic. You're
I did.
now working with patients regardless of geography, right? I mean, anywhere, correct?
Yes, so I actually am launching a course in first quarter of 2026.
Oh,
So
amazing.
after the whole New Year's resolution thing starts to fizzle, then I'm
Yep.
introducing a course that's just for life transformation that you do this, you stick with this and you get the results you want.
And will people be able to order testing through that as well?
Yeah, so I'm looking at what levels will include the testing,
Yeah.
but that more information will be available on my website
But
as that.
currently, people can reach out to you, contact you, and work with you individually with testing, creating programs, monitoring, that sort of thing.
Currently I'm on a wait list.
Oh, wow. Good for you.
Yeah, yeah. So
Bad for
current
patients, but good for you.
yeah, yeah. So that's where I am currently. So that's why the course is I'm really looking forward
Yeah,
to the
that's really
course.
important. Yeah.
Hmm.
Really
Yeah.
magnify your impact and reach and give people access to your expertise. So it's going to be amazing.
Thank you. That's why we do what we do, right? I mean, because we get so excited when people we know things that will help people change their lives, and that's the purpose. That's the purpose of it.
It's true. How can people find out more about you?
Yeah, thank you. So my website's pretty easy, lisasmithwellness.com. And then the podcast is Pretty Well Podcast. And my social is Pretty Well _ podcast on Instagram.
And all of those are linked in the show notes. Definitely check those out because you have a very, I think, unique perspective and have put things together in a professional, easy to understand way that can make tremendous positive impacts on people's lives. So thanks for spending some time with me today. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on. Such a pleasure.